Well, good afternoon, or almost evening. I've just briefed the Security Council, as you know, in closed session about the utterly devastating situation in Gaza. I've spoken of the inhumane conditions in which our fellow human beings, civilians, are trying to survive, the young and the old. We've also spoken, of course, of the context and our hope for a ceasefire and the unconditional release of the hostages, that this would enable, obviously, a further surge of assistance. But ultimately, I have painted a very, very bleak picture as civilians in Gaza continue to suffer. And I've mentioned to the council members that I visited Gaza in the course of my life, different professional roles since the end of the 80s. As a volunteer, I visited as a UN staff member, I visited as a UNICEF regional director, and in 2020 as a minister. But nothing prepares you for what you see, what you hear, and the conversations you're having with your fellow human beings, Palestinians in Gaza. The impediments that the UN faces, that civilian faces, severely obstructs our ultimate goals, that aid reaches civilians. I've reminded the Council that from April this year, I've spoken about the risk of a breakdown in law and order, and particularly lawlessness, the looting. That's only, of course, exacerbated an already very difficult situation. It also impacts what's left of the social fabric and social stability. We've also seen in Gaza, and the Council spoke on that a lot also this afternoon, that if and when there is political will, we can work. If the parties have agreements and they are adhered to, such as with the polio campaign, we can reach people. Now, since my last briefing in September, I've continued to engage with key governments and have advocated at the highest levels. We've also discussed and submitted again to the Israeli government our proposals, our asks. Some of them are long-standing, some were new or an augmentation. For instance, of course, the acute need for winterization materials, for health materials, and all of the essential supplies that are so much lacking in Gaza. I've also discussed, of course, with Israeli government officials what is the very clear United Nations line on the mandate of UNRWA, on the indispensable role the agency plays, particularly in Gaza, but not only in Gaza. And you know that the Secretary General has been very clear on this. What we also need when we speak about assistance to Gaza is the reopening of Rafah border crossing. We've had a very good conference in Egypt, in Cairo, graciously hosted and co-organized with the government of Egypt. It put Gaza again on the spotlight, the pre-positioning, the goods, and what could be done via the Egyptian route if Rafah is reopened. Gaza also, of course, needs the restart of the commercial sector. People want to buy, they want to see a great diversity of goods, and we need to keep pushing for a broadening of what is considered dual-use goods. But we cannot meet the needs of civilians in Gaza, even through a humanitarian pipeline, as much as it can be ramped up and scaled up, without the commercial sector. It is simply not possible. And ultimately, and it's a discussion that came back this afternoon a lot as well, we need to have clarity on the governance and security arrangements for Gaza. Now, the voice of the international community and the position is clear. We need a return of the PA. They have the plans for early recovery and reconstruction. They have the staff. We can help organize the financing, and the United Nations and many other partners, NGOs, Palestinian NGOs and international NGOs, can work to further those goals, to realize statehood, a Palestinian state, alongside a safe and secure Israel. Last but not least, I've also briefed on what we've done in the course of this 12-month period. We've negotiated the access. We have kept at the highest levels the contacts with every foreign minister. I engage continuously with the Israeli government at all levels. We continue to discuss. We have helped organize and negotiate and establish all the routes from Cyprus, from Egypt, from Jordan, procurement from Israel and the West Bank. We've also established a database. We have a pre-notification system, an approval system. Monitors are in Gaza on under 2720 as we speak. So all this, a cross-country operation, has been established, negotiated, and ultimately we have established the trust and the continued negotiations and conversations with the parties. Does it meet all the needs of people in Gaza? This is a far cry. And I've said this to the Council. There is no substitute. No system can and will substitute or compensate for an absence or lack of political will. This is political will and political choice. This you cannot ask of the UN, of the humanitarians. This is where member states and the parties are at play. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Kaag. Always nice to see you here. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said today that there has been virtually no food or other humanitarian aid delivered in North Gaza for 66 days, which has put the lives of perhaps 65,000, 75,000 Palestinians at great risk. What is your office doing to try to address that situation? We know that you have good contacts with the Israeli government. And as a follow-up to that, OCHA also said that there are only 4 UN-supported bakeries in all of Gaza, and all of them are in Gaza City. What's the UN doing to try and open more bakeries? Thank you.
Well, I think in general, the UN is doing what it will always do. It continues to push, to organize missions, ask approvals, often get denials, be it for military operations or other security reasons given, but continue to prepare and to try to be there and reach the north. And also be very clear in its voice and advocacy, and to underscore on the basis of data what hasn't reached people. I'm doing the same. I'm doing that at a political level. But asking and clarifying and asking again doesn't mean you get the approval. And this to me is also where member states again have a clear role to play. There is no substitute for sovereignty. As I said, don't ask the humanitarians to do more. We can do 50,000 things differently, but ultimately it is decision to try to reach people. In recent days, there have been some convoys that have been allowed in. I'm also told that yesterday goods were allowed in via the Philadelphia corridor. That may be a trial run, and some other trucks have reached. It's not always easy on the day-to-day thermometer for me locally to say this has reached, that hasn't reached. But I do everything with my team in support of WFP, of UNRWA, of UNICEF, of the collective of the United Nations family, their plans.
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. I want first to ask you about the UNRWA and the Israeli legislation that we know it didn't go into effect yet, but what are you hearing? And if that go into effect and UNRWA is banned, how would this affect your work in Gaza, the UN work, I mean, in general? And then you said that you were there recently in Gaza and you met people. If you could share with us some of the things that you saw or things that you heard from people. Thank you.
Well, I will start with the last. On the one hand, I'm always deeply humbled and struck by the individual dignity. But people also feel abandoned by all of us, and I've said this to the Council. At the end of the day, you'll know it. The ask is, where is the international community? When will there be a ceasefire? You've seen in recent days also in response to the Lebanon ceasefire, Palestinians expressed a worry. Will we be forgotten, or will it our turn be next? So people live between a little bit of hope, to my mind, but I want to be careful to speak on behalf of others, a little bit of hope and ultimate despair. Parents are very worried what will happen to the future of schooling of their children. Some of the very early informal learning that now takes place and gets organized by UNRWA and also UNICEF and fantastic Palestinian NGOs, it is children playing, sitting in the sand, in the cold, in a tent. You know, if there's one thing that Palestinians care about, as you know, is education. Education, if you're stateless, is your key to emancipation. It's dignity, it is your independence, education is essential, and parents are all profoundly worried. I've also spoken to parents on another visit that said, yeah, we'd love our children to go actually back to learning, but actually we are now too poor. They need to rummage around to try to find some goods that maybe that could be traded or otherwise. So the impact is so profound. There's also a profound worry about the future of UNRWA, because people follow and read their social media, everything is on the mobile phones. So they wonder what will happen to them. Now, on UNRWA, the position of the UN is very clear, and I, of course, also carry that out and communicate that. I cannot second guess. I am not here to represent anyone, but the legislation's been adopted. And I don't hear or see any political desire to alter that on the part of the Israelis.
Thank you. Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. Thank you for taking some questions, Ms. Kaag. A lot of the focus right now, as you well know, is on Syria for obvious reasons. In the meantime, what's happening in Gaza continues, and it's gotten even worse. How do you see the role of keeping the focus on Gaza, number one? And number two, there was great hope when you assumed your current position many months ago that you could convince the Israelis to get more aid into Gaza. Clearly that has not happened. All the metrics have gone down, not up. How would you grade the job that you've been able to do over the last multiple months you've been in this position?
Well, you know, I've been in Dutch politics. I'm never going to grade myself. I'm not that foolish. But more importantly, if it was up to one person, a humble UN senior civil servant, I would challenge you, then it would be a simple problem. Where internationally presidents have not been able to move the dial, and we have been collectively killing ourselves to establish systems, negotiate, to get dual-use items in, to assist children that are deaf, to get their hearing aids in, I make no excuses. But my call is for the international community. Member states with sovereignty and the importance of international humanitarian law and the responsibility, accountability of the parties lies there. But you can ask us, are we ready? Have we done what we should be doing? Yes. We've established the systems, the teams, the mechanism, the database. We've organized the supplies, we've organized the financing, and I keep touring around the world precisely to keep Gaza on the map with the political direction of travel, what are rights as opposed to favors, what people need, not only now and the future. We've established a financing plan, we have the recovery and reconstruction plans, and we have to say it, in the absence of, in the flurry of activity, we've made the mission a go-to point at the highest political level to provide clarity and direction. But no substitute for political will that we don't possess, member states possess it.
And doesn't Israel possess some political will in this process as well?
Well, I think that's a different question. One of them is, of course, the constant need to adhere and comply with international humanitarian law. My conversations are always around our asks, and the message is, it doesn't matter if it crosses the crossings. Crossings we also helped establish, and openings or routes. It only matters in metrics when it reaches people. And that, of course, is an F. But that's on the parties. We can do everything, but we cannot deliver in an unsafe and insecure environment. We can't work when the goods get looted. And we are dependent on so many other factors. Availability of fuel, permissions, approvals, the ability to cross road from A to B, and then to be in a position to do it safely and securely. This is a very complex situation, but it's not about a logistics system, it is about politics.